Okay, we're going to go to the big city today, St. Augustine, as part of the Seminole Wars Heritage Trail. This booklet was published 10 years ago in 2015. So, in honor of the 10th anniversary, I'm revisiting some of the sites and updating you on some sites that may have been missed, some sites that we did not include the book, or some sites that could be added if we redid it today. So, anyway, it was a booklet created by the Florida Department of State and the Seminole Wars Foundation. Let me show it right here. Oh, before I do that, because we're going to town, I wore my fanciest frock coat here. This is made out of high quality British fabric there, so no small expense. And also this gorget that I'm wearing, you can't see it on the low quality video, but it has a shield on it that looks like the Army Adjutant Corps. Ah, and there's reflection from the computer screen. If I can keep that out of there. Okay, let me show you the booklet here. This is a Seminole War Heritage Trail booklet that you can get for free, and I have a link in the description below. Mentions different sites that you can visit. And we finished up with the Northwest region. Now we're in the Northeast region. Going to the map, last week I did include Madison with the Tallahassee and also Fanning Springs because that's kind of the Big Bend Gulf Coast. So we're going to go from Alligator, or what today is Lake City, head east, go to Jacksonville, then head down to St. Augustine, and that'll be plenty for today. I don't want to go over half an hour. I just barely got to half an hour on the last video. Then next week, I'll probably stay to the different regions for pretty much the rest. Next time I'll cover Bulow Plantation, and a later video will cover the other plantation ruins in Volusia County. We'll go to Palatka, Gainesville, Micanopy, and we'll just see where we go from there. So, anyway, I know you'll enjoy our program today. So, let's start off. The first place we're visiting is Alligator, now Lake City. It was originally a settlement called Alligator because it was named after the chief. I thought his name Alapata Tustanugi. They Talofa. Uh, okay. Anyway, Alligator was a famous Seminole War chief. And so we got a historical marker there. If we go down the road, we're in McClenny, Baker County, and there's an interesting house here. This is the Burnstead Block House. And there's a historical park in McClenny, has all these old cabins and uh, houses or buildings from historical area put in this park. You can see I visited during Christmas time there last year. This is actually the front of the house, and there's a back view of the house. Looks like your typical cracker house. They have several of these at Fort Christmas, which is another stop we'll make later on. And let's go to the other side of the house. You see along the chimney, there's these holes in the side of the house. The legend is that these holes were cut in here to stick rifle barrels out and shoot out and defend yourself. Have uh, the old log cabin be a fortified log cabin. Look at that dovetail split. Oh, that really neat architecture on that. So anyway, we go to Jacksonville, and we have just one place. Of course, you have Fort Caroline in Jacksonville, but that's an earlier time period. But there's a sign here for a blockhouse that stood here during the Seminole Wars, and it must be crooked in the photo because it looks like we're either on a slope or the sign's kind of slanted here. Uh-oh. But let's go down the road in Middleburg, or Fort Heilman. Now they misspelled it. Fort Heilman is spelled different. It is named after Lieutenant Colonel Julius Heilman, and it's supposed to be spelled Heiliman. And it was a major army post. As the ships would come to Jacksonville, they'd put steamboats down and they'd come up Black Creek and dock at Fort Heilman, which was the main quartermaster base for the Second Seminole War. And I think it was abandoned about 1840 for the army moving further down. But from here, they put supplies on wagons and go Micanopy and further south from there. And there's a few other forts in the area, like Fort Sanderson, named after Lieutenant James Sanderson, who was killed by Seminole Indians in May of 1840. But anyway, that's a sidetrack. There's no marker for that. Let's go to Fort Muse. Now, this is a new state park, or the state park has acquired it within the past 20 years. And they have just reconstructed the fort or the blockhouse. As you can see here, in fact, when I was there about a year ago, um, they were still they were still in the process of breaking grounds and building it. And it kind of looks unusual. And looking at some of the old descriptions of the blockhouse, actually seemed pretty accurate. If you've gone to Fort King George in Georgia, it's a very similar structure. Fort Muse was a black community of escaped slaves or runaway slaves from the Carolinas, and the Spanish would allow them to be free men if they became Catholics, pledged their loyalty to the Spanish crown, and helped defend the city. So, those were the requirements for your freedom, and May took up the offer at the time. Fort Muse, I think there's two or three different locations because of the tide affected the area. You can still see one of them from the boardwalk that walks out into the salt marsh, or at least see it at a distance. You can't get to it. Um, but it was also occupied only for a very short period, I think like 1738 to 1740, and then maybe briefly after that. The U.S. Army occupied the location of Fort Muse in the War of 1812, what we call the Patriot War, in their failure to take St. Augustine. So that's definitely to check out. It's on the north side of St. Augustine off of, uh, I think, Highway 1. You just follow the signs and heading. Well, this is a painting at the National Guard headquarters done by Jackson Walker of a fight between the soldiers at Fort Muse and the British soldiers who attacked. So a very exciting painting there. I just love his work, and I might have a few more. There's plenty of them at the St. Augustine at the National Guard headquarters. So moving to you can call it either Fort Marion, which is what the Americans called it, or Castillo de San Marcos. Seems like they called a while their Fort San Marcos. There's St. Mark, south of Tallahassee, was also called San Marcos, but it was San Marcos de Apalache. This is the Castillo de San Marcos. And this is a postcard from about 1907. From the top of the fort, you can see a hot shot furnace there that dates from the 1840s. There's a mortar there. Today you can walk around. Now, let me remind you, if you're a veteran like myself, you can get a free uh, pass for the national parks. So you don't, it's a little expensive getting into the fort. Now, on the other side of the fort here, they have a casemate. Um, I think it's on the west side. There's a casemate where Osceola was kept prisoner, and this is, of course, an old postcard too. Of course, they don't have it anymore. And the fort's also famous where they held Kiowa prisoners in the 1870s, Cheyenne and Kiowa. And then later on in the 1880s, they held the Apache here for a couple years, the Chiricahua Apache. So very interesting to spot to visit. And here we are making our escape. The Seminoles, the story is that they escaped out of this very narrow port, and I've done a video on that in the past. Originally, this was a pretty much a dry moat that would be filled up by the tides down there. And you can also see the fort in the movie Distant Drums. There now, Osceola, who was kept prisoner here, his capture site would have been southeast of town. This is an old picture from the um, Florida Memory website. Unfortunately, it's no longer accessible. It was supposed to be saved as a park, but the county went ahead and built houses on top of it. So the areas, I think, is probably destroyed. Um, if even the concrete post remains, I know the plate on it didn't remain, but they know it's the site because when they made this marker in the 1890s, they actually had a soldier who is a veteran who was there when Osceola was captured. Now, on the south side, I think it's the south side of St. Augustine, yes, is St. Francis Barracks, 82 Marine Street, there on the southeast corner. And it was the originally St. Francis Monastery that the Spanish had. Then the British occupied it and started using it as a barracks. And after that, the Spanish and then the Americans. It's probably the oldest uh, military facility still in use in the United States here. And every year in August, on the second weekend of August, we have a commemoration ceremony. I missed it this year because I was other obligations, but I try to get there. It's like a 4 or 5 hour drive one way, so it's kind of tough. Here, the soldiers are going past the front, the water or their coastal waters off to the right. There are the soldiers in their summer white uniforms, and then the modern National Guard behind them, walking past, and they go to the cemetery. As they pass by, we have a caisson, is kind of representing the funeral procession that they had for the different regiments that was held on the ceremony, and I think it's August 15th, 1842. Kind of where I'm standing taking this photograph is this post right here. There's different commemoration plaques of the Florida National Guard and the battles they fought. And this is the battle they participated at Kanapaha Prairie in Alachua County in 1838, which also included the Second Dragoons. So I thought that was neat. As you walk down the street, there's an interpretive sign about St. Francis Barracks. And even the houses, these were the officers' houses. I think they were built in the late 1800s, like 1870s or 80s. The One of the officers who was commander, who was adjutant of General Worth in the 1840s, getting ahead, Joseph T. Sprague, he was commander of Florida forces after the Civil War and also in charge of the Freedmen's Bureau. And visiting the commemoration is our friend Danny Tommy with a canoe that he carved. So he's back in the area. One neat thing that the Seminole tribe has been doing with the reenactments um, for the past 30 years, at least that I know of, is that the Seminole tribe has wanted to join in and give their side of the story and their interpretation. And it's very unique and much welcome for that. So Danny Tommy, he's a regular participant in some of our events, and you can see behind him the howitzer they did for firing a salute later on the water's edge. This is a cemetery that uh, procession of soldiers marching down. They were coming here to the cemetery. The cemetery, I think the earliest grave is about 1828. Maybe it says on here. Maybe not. Anyway, so during the Seminole War, they started to quickly fill up the cemetery um, until In 1842, that I mentioned they had that ceremony here, and there's three pyramids. Originally, they were plastered over, but the plaster's long gone. You can see the funeral procession here, and they put the remains of the soldiers from each of the regiments in one of the pyramids. They have the remains of Dade's men, about 100 men that were killed at Dade Battle in December 28th, 1835. Another pyramid is the remains of the officers of all the, uh, 12, 14 regiments that came to Florida, the two dragoon regiments, four artillery regiments, and eight infantry regiments that served in Florida. And maybe they have the remains of some of the Marines or Navy. Um, anyway, they have one pyramid for Dade's men, another pyramid for the officers that died in the Seminole War. So that's about 40 or so. And then there's another pyramid of soldiers who died in combat or gallant meritorious service. So not all the soldiers who died during the war were buried here. Um, it seemed like that be kind of hard to find and do, even though it has said on the sign all the soldiers are buried here. Actually, no, they're not. We've looked into the records and figure there's probably about 400 buried in these three different monuments. Um, there's a see if I can see it. Anyway, there's also a gray marble monument made from Vermont marble. That's really nice. No, that's not it behind. That's a smaller one. But anyway, very unique place. I know a lot of the names of those who are buried here. Of course, here's part of the wreath laying ceremony. Uh, got a little folklore. I think one of those houses back there is severely haunted because it keeps going up on the market. Either that or it keeps flooding because of the king tide or something. So inside the officers' quarter, they have a museum that covers all the history of the Spanish, British, American occupation, even up to the modern times. They do offer tours. You can't just walk up there, but you have to be scheduled with a tour that goes in here, and they have a historian that will do the tour. Or if you're part of our commemoration on the second Saturday in August, um, so anyway, um, so you do have to register to get in there, um, but it's a very unique museum. And those walls behind it, that's the original coquina wall of the building that was built by the Spanish. Now across the street, you see this house, which I used for my virtual background. This is the oldest house in St. Augustine, and we don't have it in our Heritage Trail brochure or booklet because uh, it's not dealing directly with the Seminole War. General Joseph Hernandez did live in this house for a period of time during the Seminole War. So a lot of the Seminole War history is ingrained in St. Augustine and in the bricks and buildings. Um, Now, if you go northeast of town towards Palatka, and it took me a long time to find this historical marker. It took me about three or four tries until I found it last year. The site was mowed and it's been cleared. It's been moved to, I think it's Highway County Road or State Road 208, um, going to Piccolata, that the theatrical troupe of that was leaving, and I think it was May 19th, 1840. They were leaving St. Augustine, going to Piccolata to catch a riverboat. And along the way, Chief Kawakachi, or who we know as Wildcat, attacked them, expecting to have a lot of provisions. But to their surprise and joy, they found trunks full of theatrical costumes, which the Seminoles themselves wore. So much so that they wore it during a talk with talk with the general in Florida later on, about 6 months later. Now, after that, Kawakachi and his warriors, I think about 30 or 40, went to one of the plantations and put the plantation basically under siege. The master and his son were held up in the house, barricaded in their house. So Kawakachi, he gets all the slaves of the plantation and orders them to cook up all the food and have a great feast for him and his warriors. So they gorge themselves on all the food and invite any of the slaves to come with them if they want to escape slavery. And some do, and some stay behind. By the time the army and Florida militia catches up the next day, they're all gone. So amazing story that I've written about in my book, Alachua Ambush, because uh, we know about the story about the actors, but nobody else has ever told about the party afterwards. Now, if you go to Piccolata, there's a historical marker for William Bartram, who was present when the Seminoles signed a treaty. Actually, it says Creek, but it was I think it was Cowkeeper who signed a treaty with the British in 1765. Piccolata was an important river crossing during the Seminole War and where the steamboats landed and then got on the wagons and went to St. Augustine from there. Here's another uh, historical marker too. Uh, so it's a large stage line, it says at this point. On private property, there's actually the site of a cemetery there that had about 40 soldiers that were buried there who were at Fort Piccolata. Now we know one of the officers um, was moved to the cemetery in St. Augustine because we have a tombstone. But it's my guess that the other soldiers might still be buried there. We're not sure about that unless somebody actually does an archaeological excavation. But if you go southeast of St. Augustine, I think it's about 4 miles, no, southwest of St. Augustine, Treaty Park, the Treaty of Moultrie Creek in 1823 between the United States and the Seminoles. They have this really neat park here, and we're not sure of the actual treaty site, but it was probably real close to the site here. Here's a original monument like the one we had where Osceola was captured. There's a similar monument put here. And there's several interpretive signs in the park. Here, of course, is a historical marker, interpretive signs about the Treaty of Moultrie Creek, capture of Osceola, and getting a little ahead of myself. Definitely worth a stop, and it won't cost you anything. It's free. Now, going a little further down the road, southwest of St. Augustine, is the site of Fort Payton. Now, it is in the book, and just have to pay very good attention because it's very hard to find there. I talked to John Mary Loomis, so you can see it also has a monument similar to the other two that we showed you. And there's the old historical marker, and it has a new marker done by the city that says exactly what the old marker says. There's a trail that goes about 200 yards between two houses and into the woods, and it's on the creek bank here, Moultrie Creek. Um, Hopefully, I saw in the back it looked like they were building more houses back there. Hopefully not. I hope it remains some of the sense of being in the woods. Here's the modern marker here of Fort Payton, which I think the city did a nice job on that and good that they recognized. And this is actually a city park, believe it or not, hidden out in the woods. Very hard to find. So, okay, let's go to our back to our booklet here. So we went into St. Augustine. So we've covered Madison, Alligator, Burnside Blockhouse, Jacksonville Blockhouse, Fort Heilman is still spelled wrong on the marker or in the booklet because that's what the marker says. St. Augustine area covered uh, Fort Payton, yeah, Treaty Park. I guess next show Next video, we'll do Buell Plantation, Palatka, which has a remaining officers' quarters from 1840, Micanopy area, and Gainesville, and San Flasco Hammock, and we did Fort Fanning already. And that'll knock off the rest of the Northeast region for our next program. And I hope you enjoyed it and having fun traveling Florida without driving anywhere. It's funny because mentioning about that John Mary Lou Missile, who did most of the legwork to find all these sites, drove about 5,000 miles, all within Florida, of course, to get to every one of the sites in the booklet. So big hats off to them. Actually, my hat's off. Maybe next video I'll be wearing my turban. So enough for now. I hope you enjoyed it.